Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, those of you that are in the audience that braved the weather. Appreciate you coming out. And those of you on Zoom, thanks for taking the time for us to discuss the potential new highway maintenance facility. So our goals for tonight are to give you information, answer some questions. This is by no means the end all and be all. We want to have the community have as much opportunity as possible to ask questions and to get information prior to the vote that will be on the ballot that's being sent out. So this is in reference to an article where the select board is asking the town of Elmore to allow us to pursue the land purchase as well as building a new highway maintenance facility. So if you have any questions, those of you on Zoom, Caroline DeVore will be monitoring that. We'll try and answer them. We'll try and take them from there. And then of course, those of you that are here tonight will get an opportunity at the end of the meeting to take questions and answer those. Before we get too far into it, I just wanted to introduce Caroline DeVore, chairperson of the Elmore Select Board, Glenn Schwartz, Elmore Select Board, myself, I'm Rob Wills, and start off by thanking Sharon Fortune and the Elmore Methodist Church, who has allowed us to have 2 meetings here, and we're going to have 2 more. So it's really appreciate you opening this building up to us, because this is the only place where we can really have a meeting to accommodate a potential crowd as well as follow the COVID guidelines. So thank you, Sharon, and the Elmore Methodist Church. Michelle and Shorty, who are out this morning at 3:30, plowing and sanding, or not plowing, but sanding like crazy, and now have been plowing and sanding since then. So thanks, guys. Dolan Patrick, who's been helping us with our audio visual and making this Zoom meeting and informational meeting possible without being on hand. So thank you, Dolan, for all your help. And Peter from Cross Consulting, who is our engineer consultant, who is meeting with us via Zoom, who's going to be a part of this meeting later, but just really want to thank him for taking the time to be a part of this tonight. So why we're here to discuss the potential new highway maintenance facility. We're going to talk about the timeline and rationale, how we got to this point, what we are trying to do as a select board, what's our driving forces in making decisions about the new facility. And then we're going to go over the site plan, potential site plan, a potential building, a budget, and then at the very end, take any questions so that we can hopefully answer your questions. And if we can't answer them tonight, we're going to have another informational meeting. And if it's a question that we can answer before, we will also answer it before. We'll get back to you. All right. Yes. Okay, so yes, our next informational meeting is February 24th, again at 6 o'clock, and it'll be held here as well. Hopefully the weather will cooperate a little bit better. That's correct. That meeting, we will also discuss because we're not having an in-person town meeting again this year because of COVID, we are going to discuss the budget at that meeting as well, that informational meeting. So we will not have an in-person town meeting, which means that you will be getting ballots with all the decisions that we make at town meeting. We're going to address them through a ballot rather than on site. So. Yeah, I stopped into the town clerk's office today, and Sharon was working, showed me the ballot, showed an example. She does not have them back from the printer yet, so, but everyone will get one. Right. Okay. And also thanks to Sharon Draper, who I bombarded her this afternoon, came in and had to make some copies and just help us to plan for tonight. So thanks, Sharon. Okay, so our timeline. So those of you that are here, I handed you one. Those of you on Zoom, that is something, they have access to that? Okay, you will have access to that, but I'm just going to quickly go through it. So we'll start with pre-2018. The select board was made aware that the current town facility was in need of significant improvement. Some concerns about some OSHA concerns, as well as just the building in general. The history on the building is that building was gifted to the town of Elmore when the CCC did all the work on the park. It was never intended to be made into a highway garage, but we made it work. And now we're at the point of needing more than just a little work. So since pre-2018, the select board had been getting money every year in the town budget, $10,000 to help think about what we're going to be doing with a new facility, investigating potential answers to questions about the facility. So that's been happening for a while. The structural deterioration was raised to us. It's been in the town for years, but we kept having a window of 5 to 10 years, 5 to 10 years. In December of 2008, it was brought to our attention that there was some structural concerns. Michelle Lacasse, our road commissioner and highway maintenance employee, came to us with concerns. We had an engineering evaluation done by DeWolf, and it was determined that the garage had structural deficiencies when it was modified to accommodate the bigger trucks. Some changes were made to the building that brought about some structural concerns. So here we are in 2018, we start weighing options of repair versus replacement. December 2019, we hired DeWolf to examine the potential of using the current site to reconstruct a building. March 2020, DeWolf shares at town meeting structural report as well as a feasibility study about using the potential site. In the spring and summer of 2020, we start visiting area highway maintenance facilities to see what we may need, what other towns in the area and also similar size, what they were doing. In the summer of 2020, we reached out to Bob Burley to help us refine criteria for a new garage, meaning size, functionality, amenities, site criteria, and list of potential sites. The fall of 2020, Mr. Burley meets with the state to discuss a potential land swap. Mr. Burley had offered up some of his land to be swapped for some state park land. The fall of 2020 to the winter 2021, the board is investigating funding options to support site requirements and building requirements as they were identified. And then from 2021, we developed a rating scale to identify potential sites and to help us narrow down the requirements that we would need from a new site. Both in discussing this with Mr. Burley, as well as thinking about our potential site and the concerns that we have about our potential site, we decided it was not in the town's best interest to use the site that this town garage is on now. May 2021, we developed a matrix. We made contact with several landowners of desired sites. None of the sites, no land in the town of Elmore was for sale of the people that we reached out to. Only site where the landowner was willing to sell was the Keith property along Route 12.
That isn't a town home.
I'm sorry?
That there were no sites available in town home.
Of the sites that we identified that we called people about for being willing to sell, no one was willing to sell except for the Keiths.
We looked at property that were both for sale.
Carolyn, nobody can hear you.
So just to clarify, we looked at properties that were both for sale and not listed for sale, but the property met our criteria that was established for the town garage. So that you're clear that what we looked at, we did not limit ourselves to just properties that were currently listed for sale, but we contacted all landowners in Elmore who had land, owned land that would be appropriate and met the criteria for the garage. And we reached out to them and asked them if they would be interested in selling land to the town. So that's what Rob means. So it was all land, whether it was for sale or not for sale, we reached out to all landowners who had appropriate parcels that could accommodate the new town garage.
So the early summer of 2021, the select board solicits pricing and scopes from 3 firms to evaluate potential sites. The summer of 2021, we visited the Keith property along Route 12. July 2021, the board got pricing for a temporary structure that we would be used in the spring, knowing that we couldn't continue to use our facility that we have. We will reuse that temporary structure as a new sand shed on the new property. August 2021, Mr. Burley meets again with the state to discuss further the land swap. Concerns arise about the potential time frame to make this happen. The state was telling Mr. Burley it could be up to 3 years. We met with the board. The board met with the state reps to help understand the land swap assistance and see if there was anything that they could do to help us. September 2021, the board voted to hire Cross Consulting and engineers to evaluate sites. We purchased a temporary structure for the spring of 2022 and for future use. Cross Consulting provides a detailed report in November to the select board on their findings of evaluating 3 sites. The report identifies a lower site at the Keith property, excuse me, and provided us a preliminary budget for the project. December 2021, Cross does schematics of what the new facility would look like. And in January of 2021, the town began negotiating on pricing for the land with the Keith family. So that's the time frame that we looked at for identifying and moving forward with a new facility. There have been factors that have been driving this, and one is obviously the safety of our staff. We cannot have our employees working in an unsafe environment. We've made modifications to increase the structural integrity of the building, but we know this cannot wait. We have to get this done. When we looked at the facility, what we're looking at is something that will be built for generations. This is not a building that we're going to build that's going to last 20 years. We're looking at 50+ years. So we asked Cross Consulting to take that into consideration when helping us develop a building. And for me, as I look at this project, I want to learn from the mistakes that I've seen in the 20 years that I've been in Lamoille County. And some of those mistakes can be seen and things like the hockey facility in Morrisville that was built and had lots of energy, and it petered out because never thought about the long-term needs of the community and how we were going to support it. When I first moved to Lamoille County, I was teaching at Morristown Elementary School, and all the talk was, we want to do all these improvements to our school, to all of the graded building, PA, as well as the elementary school. I taught in a cafeteria / gym for years until finally they passed a bond in order to do the work at those schools. And it was maybe a third of what they originally had planned. Since that time, they've been on many projects to get where they wanted to be 25 years ago. And during that time, I would guarantee you it cost them 4 times as much as if they just done it right the first time. So that's a conversation that I've had with the board since I've been here on the select board, and just saying, listen, we want to do this right the first time. It's always cheaper in the long term to do it right the first time and get everything that we need, not just for today and not just for 10 years down the road, but for generations, because it's just more and more expensive. Construction costs last year went up almost 40%. That number's not going down. It may not jump another 40%, but it's not going to zero. So those are the driving factors and our rationale for bringing this forward to the town to have them decide to decide. But what we were hoping was town meeting day, but instead we'll have to do it through a Australian ballot. Okay, so we've talked about the time frame. The next piece is the potential new site. So we hired Cross Consulting to evaluate 3 sites for the potential build, and the lower site along Route 12 was identified as the most appropriate, even taking into consideration the generous offer of Mr. Burley to do a potential land swap. It was determined that this site was the most feasible based on line of sight, the flatness of the land, access to Route 12, being in the center of town, and based on test pits that were done. So now maybe a good time to have Peter discuss the potential sites and what he found. So Peter's joining us remotely tonight because of the weather.
Yeah, just to add something, I have all the drawings that he's going to present up here. So at the end of the meeting, if you want to see the drawings in person, they're on the easel over here. So you'll be able to take the opportunity to go through there and see it a little bit clearer than the screen.
Sure. Can you guys hear me all right?
It's a little hard to hear. Right?
Yeah, you can turn it up.
We can turn it up.
Try again, Peter. We turned it up on our side.
Sure. There's a little bit of an echo here. I'm not sure if you're getting an echo on your end, but I'll do my best to be clear.
It's not loud enough.
So how would you like me to go through? Do you want me to go through the report, or would you like me to go through the site plans that we developed for the Keith property? I can run an audible either way.
I would say just go through a summary of the report And then if you could present the drawings, I have a copy here for the people that are in the audience.
Everybody have.
Sure. So as we was mentioned, we looked at 3 sites. Really, we kind of consider this 2 sites, the state property and then the Keith property. And then there's just a couple locations on the Keith property that we kind of went into a little bit deeper evaluation of which area would be best. To start on the state property, on Route 12, what was found there, and I'm going to kind of make this kind of brief and to the point, and then if there's any questions after, I can answer those with more detail. So as far as the state property is concerned, really it comes down to the steepness of the slopes and the fact that there's bedrock involved. So by the time, even if you got that property for free, the amount of site work and cost it would take to get that constructible would far outweigh the savings on the property itself. And then once you're finished, then you still have a property with a steep access going down to Route 12 with not great site distance. So on that property itself, we kind of deem that one as not really favorable for construction of the town garage. And then we moved over to the Keith property, which is also on Route 12 on the other end of town. It's a more of a flat open site. And there's 2 areas, we call it the southern end and the north end, that can both adequately support development for the town garage. And the reason why we recommend northern property is it's a little bit closer, it's a little bit lower, so it would be screened a little bit better from the road, also a little bit further out of the wind. And the fact that it is closer to the road has a little bit less construction costs for the road itself. Just for example, the road to the south site on the Keith property would probably be about $100,000 more of construction costs than on the north side, just because of the extra length. The rest of the site itself is pretty equatable to each other as far as what would be involved in site work, and then everything else that's involved in the construction of the facility. So it's really just a matter of being a little bit closer, less road getting into it, and then the advantage of being a little bit lower, less visible, and more out of the wind. So having recommended that site to the town, we then went through an exercise to develop a conceptual site plan for the northern site. And then that's the cost estimate that we put together in the report is based on that site. And I guess at this point, if you want me to, I could share my screen and show the site plan. Glenn, if that.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, show the site plan and the conceptual drawings of the building itself.
So is that coming up for you guys? Right
Yes,
now,
we could say
right
it.
now I should be showing the report.
That's correct. We could say it.
Yeah, so I can go back and forth to those. I'm gonna head over to the concept here. So this is the concept plan that we put together, which shows this is the southern lot on the Keith property. And then right now, this is the boundaries of what we're calling the north lot and Keith property, which is what we're recommending for development. If you can see my cursor trace the line there. And then this is the remaining 10-acre parcel residential on the Keith family. That's going to be subdivided off when the subdivision takes place. So if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see where we're recommending the site location of the town garage is. You'll see that this is a shorter driveway versus bringing it all the way around up to the southern lot. And then the property itself. Again, this, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier or if it was mentioned in the preliminary intro. The garage facility itself is based off of the Montgomery facility that we designed. I think it was back in around 2012, if I remember correctly. So it's based on that design, which is a 5-bay garage. There's some parking and a small office area. And then we show some staging area, a sand shed location, the temp building. And then on this site, we got some outdoor storage that can be in a couple of different areas. And we do have a location for the septic field on the site. We also put together a conceptual grading plan. It's not construction level or detailed at this point, but just to show how much cut and fill would be involved in the site itself. The two schematics on the right side of the plan show the difference in cut, which is the red and the orange area, down to a neutral in the middle, and then a fill down in the blue area on the more northern end of the site. Right now, I believe the site is about a 6% slope across from southeast to northwest. Pull up the facility itself. We also put together a floor plan. Again, this is based off the Montgomery garage, which is a 4-bay garage. We have a service bay, so it's a 5th bay on the end. Small office area with a couple offices, a break room, a bathroom, and a mechanical room. And then you can have a mezzanine above that for storage inside the facility as well. The bottom of the plan is a rendering, which would be the view from Route 12 if you're driving south, looking at the site. Shows some trees, some landscaping, to help kind of visually screen the property, but having the office on the north end, or excuse me, the roadside of the building itself does add some breaks to the side of the building, so it's not so industrial looking. So that does help. So that's a general overview of what we've done. I can answer any questions you guys have at this point.
Yeah, Peter, do you have the other drawing that you put together that shows what the building looks like in different views?
I do. Let me find that. Bear with me. It's the same one. It's maybe the same one. I have to find out what my architect labeled that file. I'm going to search my email for that from him, Glenn. If you bear with me, I'll look at this and we can answer any other questions while I'm looking.
So those of you that are here, it's back of what Peter just shared, it's that back page.
And we do have a larger drawing here. Like I said, after the meeting, if you want to take a look at it, I'll look at it. It'll be a little clearer than what you have.
For online, he'll find.
Yeah, and online, we'll post it. There'll also be minutes from today's meeting that'll have everything with it also.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. It was actually on the same file, just on the next page. So you should be able to see that now.
Yeah, we can see it. So if you want to
This
just walk
on the
us
very
through
top has the four different elevations from each view. And then again, the sort of just a little bit different view rendering on the bottom two sheets, which would be coming up the driveway on the middle rendering, and then the lower rendering would be, standing on the salt shed area, looking back towards the garage, back towards the road.
All right, Peter, thank you. If you can hang tight till the end of the presentation in case anybody has any questions. And then we'll let Rob pick it up from here.
Would you like me to stop sharing my screen so you guys get control back, or do you want me to keep this up?
I guess if a good place to start here would be if you want to post the budget that you put together, we can put that up on the screen. He does, I gave it to him, but. See if you can find it.
So you should see it now, unless it looks like I stopped sharing. So let me put that back up.
We could see it. If you want to just walk through that, and then I'll finish up on it.
Sure. So this is a cost estimate that we put together in November. Again, as everyone's probably acutely aware at this point that materials have just been skyrocketing and have not seemed to slow down at any point lately. So there is a disclaimer on this that the estimate's as good as we could have done in November, and it certainly can be more at this point. And hopefully at some point, maybe it does slow down, like mentioned earlier. So
Here,
right now,
zoom in on that a little bit. It's a little hard to see on the screen as you go through it.
how's that?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, so the upper portion is related to the site work. And this will go from the beginning, just, mobilization of a contractor coming in, and then stripping the site and the rough grading and moving the earth around to get the balance of the site ready for the structural fill. And then you go into utilities. We're throwing some assumptions for some catch basins and storm drains to bring stormwater runoff to a stormwater area on site. And again, this is more of a conceptual estimate at this point because there's been no actual design for the stormwater system. So this is on our experience and understanding what we think is going to be required for a site this size. And then also we got some landscaping, sidewalk, and signage and pavement markings and everything else that's related to the site work up front and on top. And then underneath that, so that totals about $533,000 for the site work to get the site ready and cleaned up at the end. And then the building itself, we're estimating at about 1.2 million. And this is based on a wood frame building with mezzanine, metal siding, and then we're also throwing in a generator, standby generator as well. So this is a very, I don't want to say basic, but a simple design. It does have a little bit of elements, some architectural elements on it with, cupola and a roofed walkway on the side of the office building, but it is more to the point and simple to keep the cost down. As you've seen probably in other towns, you can really, sky's the limit of what you want it to look like. And it's just a matter of what the town's comfortable with cost. So right now we've started at a simple, straightforward and adequate building.
Okay, Peter, thank you. I guess the one thing to add to that is you did add a 20% contingency to get it to a total of approximately $2 million. To that, we'd have to add the cost of the land, which, as it turns out, we're going to need to purchase 18 acres at a negotiated price. So we're looking at about $325,000 for the land, which would bring the project at what we believe a maximum of about $2,409,000. Now, the article's written to allow us up to $2.5 million. That is, again, a maximum. We fully intend on bringing this in below budget, and we will do everything we can to bring it in there. So even though the amount's $2.5 million, we don't think that it'll quite make that, but That's a maximum that we have to ask for. In order to pay for that, we've been dealing with the USDA, who would issue a bond, a 30-year bond at a rate of, we're lucky interest rates are low, 2.125% over 30 years. And that's how we would finance it. So it would be over a 30-year period of time. Okay, so I guess at this time we can open it up to questions and see what we can do to answer them.
Why 18 acres?
So the question was, why 18 acres? And that is based on state requirements for permeable surface area. So because the size of the roof, our structures, our pavement, the state is requiring us to buy so much land that is permeable.
That's actually a town requirement. So that's based on the zoning coverage rate. So in the zoning bylaws, I believe it's only permit, or the ordinance for this district is 6% lot coverage. So right now, showing the area that we are for the impervious on site, you need 18 acres to make up for that 6% coverage. The actual site itself, could be down 3, 4, 5 acres, but in order to meet the zoning ordinance of 6%, we need the 18 acres total.
Is it possible to get a town variance?
The question was, is it possible to get a town variance? Something we could look into, but we can't count on it.
I can speak to that a bit. So I don't know all of the details of what is involved in a variance. I can tell you that the DRB, certainly we could take it to the DRB, the Elmore DRB, and see if they would, it meets the criteria. There are 5 key criteria that have to be met for a variance to be issued. And a variance hasn't been issued in the town of Elmore for over 20 years. But I think that's fair to explore and see there is a need. It has to be, and there's a technical terminology, and Peter, you may know it, but it has to meet a particular, there is no other workaround. It absolutely has to be done for need. And I would suspect that, pardon?
Sorry, I was gonna just add, and it can't be self-created hardship. That's usually the one that's very difficult to overcome.
It's the hardship, right? So I think it's fair that's a great question. And I think it's one that we should explain about what would be involved, and that we didn't believe that this would meet the criteria for that type of hardship.
I can add that with the extra land, we're talking about different possibilities. I mean, we've thrown around things in the planning commission of possibly putting up maybe a solar field that one of the power companies would actually pay us rent for that space, possibly use it as a town park with walkways. So that there are things that we would ask the town what they want to do with that extra land, but it would be available and it would be owned by the town. So if we can generate revenue from solar field, again, the town would have to approve it, but that's a possibility of something that's been tossed around. So we understand that we're buying extra land just because we have to, unfortunately.
Anybody online has questions, they can enter them in the chat. Can tell them.
Yeah, if anybody online has any questions, you can enter them on the chat and we'll read them off here. We don't see any at this point. Anybody else in the audience? Oh, another question. Oh, Sharon.
Yeah, I have a question.
Here, Sharon.
Just so that. Okay. So my question is, the dollar amount that you're projecting
that you would request from the taxpayers up to that amount to be expended for the facility, the land, everything. You have some money already set aside for that. Is that correct? So can you help me to understand what the dollar amount is that is already sort of in escrow or set aside to work to, because I know you've been very frugal in putting money forward to accommodate that request.
Well, well, in the reserve, and we put aside $10,000 every year into the reserve fund for this, and we've done that for 10 years. So there's $100,000 in the reserve. And then we're also looking at, and Glenn, you're the expert on the ARPA funds.
Yeah, the town received ARPA funding. It was over 200,000. I forget the exact amount. And it's been questioned as far as what we can actually spend that on. And we're still waiting on a final ruling, but it does appear at this time that we can utilize that ARPA funding for the garage. So if that is the case, if we have 100,000 plus 200, so 200 or $300,000 plus would be applied to the cost of the building, and that will reduce the bond that would be required. So yeah, Sharon, it's a great question. And we've been working on that, trying to figure out where we have money. And this ARPA funding, which is provided by the federal government, is a huge amount of money for this town. And we're going to utilize it the best we can.
I've got another question. Can you tell me the dimensions of the building?
Yes.
So the question for folks online is, what are the dimensions of the building?
Sorry, I was on mute here. So it's 120 by 60.
Is the concrete price already figured into this? I didn't see anything about it.
So the question, Peter, was, is the concrete price already figured into the budget?
It looks like it may not be in there. Unless that, so let me clarify that and I'll get back to you. It might be, I think it's included in the $146 a square foot for the wood frame building. I think that's where we put it. So I know it's a lot of stuff in one line item of wood frame building, but I believe we put it in there at 146 for the building itself, including foundation.
We'll verify that. I have another question. Why a 5-bay garage?
So the question for the folks online is, why a 5-bay garage?
So when we visited the Montgomery site, that's what they had. And we talked to them about how they utilize it, because we're of similar size of employees and equipment. And so they talked about the fact that this allows them to store equipment in and also move equipment in and out much easier. They can put a piece of equipment in there that's under repair and leave it there and not have to worry about moving stuff in and out and having to work around it. Because I asked them, I said, do you use all 5 bays? And they said, we do, oftentimes, because of the fact that we often have a piece of equipment in here that's apart. And actually, I believe that day that Michelle, you and I visited, I believe what one of the bays did have a bucket, a loader in there that was torn apart. And that way, we went during the middle of the day, so everybody was out. So the only thing they had in there was the loader at that point, because all their equipment was out. So that's why we decided on the 5 bays, was after talking to them and how they use the facility. And that's why the depth, the road foreman over there said, because I was like, wow, this building is deep. And he goes, this way we can double stack things. We can put a piece of equipment in here, leave it in here. We can put our loader in one bay and our grader in one bay. And then we have room to work around it. So that's why we, after talking to them, we thought that makes sense based on your size and our size. We have pretty much the same equipment. So that was the rationale.
So all your equipment's gonna be in the heated garage. Should-
Yep, everything that we would need to use at any one time will be stored inside the heated garage.
So does all that equipment have to be in the heated garage? Well, just for example, the grader goes out 2 or 3 times in the winter. The only time you need it in the heated garage is in the winter, or 2 or 3 times to get out on the road, does it need to be in? Start knocking off a bay or two, get a big decrease in cost.
Well, we talked about that. That's one of the things that I hope that people understand. This is not the final design. And that's kind of what Peter's been saying, is that this is an estimate. Once we start getting numbers and we start getting up there and we say, you know what? If we knock off a bay, we are constructing this entire site. So if we do need to add, we can. It is cheaper to do it initially rather than add it on 10 years down the road, whatever it may be. So we also are thinking about the fact that we're going to be using more equipment. We're going to be getting more stuff. It's getting harder and harder to get people for availability to do projects. Are we going to do more? Are we going to need to hire more staff? Right now we have one full-time employee. We have Shorty helping us out, thank goodness, until we can find a replacement. And with OSHA regulations, it's hard to they can't take vacations. What if they had gotten COVID? We're down, you don't just, with having 2 people, when you do the math, you lose one, that's half. That's scary. It's scary. So those are all things that we're thinking about. And I think it's a great question, Mr. Cody. I don't think we're set on 5, but we want to be in a place where we can say, we know that 5 is, we're not going to need 6. We know that this is the limit that we would need based on what we know right now and the way we envision for the next 50 years. So we're not saying that, no, we have to have 5. Once we start getting pricing on the construction end of it, I would say that one of the questions, well, I won't be on the board anymore, but I'm sure that the board will ask is, what if we did 4? How much are we really saving? I am betting, and I'm not going to hold Peter to this, but I'm betting it's not as much as you think, the savings.
If we just go based on what we're estimating the per square foot cost, it's about 175,000 for the bay. That's based on,
It might be worth doing,
say
for
about
sure.
20 foot, an extra, column, or an extra bay for the bay itself. And, or excuse me, grid line, you're probably looking at about 175,000. It's about 1,200 square feet for that extra bay.
Okay, well, I don't disagree that we need the town garage. I was on the select board in the late 70s and early 80s. We needed a new garage then. And we still need a new garage. But we don't need the Taj Mahal, is what I'm thinking. Because we have our tarp building over there that currently stores the stuff that's only used 2 or 3 times during the winter. It shows a picture of a tarp building in here, so I assume that's the tarp building that we have here that's going to get moved up there. Plus the new one.
That's correct. We are moving the cold storage. We are the temporary structure that we are going to be using until we get a new facility. We will also be moving to the site and be using as a sand shed.
So our building is not a temporary building.
That is not.
How big is it?
It's not big enough.
What's going to be in during the summer, right?
Well, if we can even find somebody to do construction this year,
You're gonna get approved by the town. We have design, we have to put it out for bid. Material supply is not the best right now. So, we're hoping that we can start construction this year, but is it realistic to think that that building is going to be complete 100%? Probably not. We're probably going to be into spring of 20 before we're really in there, unfortunately.
Well, you have taken into account that you have a future place to build number 6 if you have. You could also build 4, 5, and 6 if you had to. Because from the time I was on the board, I don't know if the town has taken over more than 10 more miles of road from when up the 1980s to now. I don't think we've taken it. We used to have like 90. I think that's where we still stand. So, we've had growth, but we haven't had road growth that requires the town to maintain extra miles of road.
That's correct. We have not gotten any roads, but the expectations have changed as well as the A&R, what the state is telling us how we have to maintain the roads. So even a simple ditching project isn't a simple ditching project anymore. So it requires more equipment, different equipment and space to do that. So I don't disagree with you in that we haven't added more miles of road, but the expectations around those roads has changed as well as what the state is telling us how we may have to maintain them.
And I'll add to that and tell you that the expectations and what the state is requiring is going to change more in the next 5 to 10 years than what we've seen in the last 20. What the town is being asked to do, from material storage to road maintenance to ditching to everything else, even the demographics of the people who are residents of the town have changed dramatically since the 70s and 80s. And the service levels that we're being expected to offer are changing. So I agree with you and thank you. We appreciate you saying that even 20 years ago, we knew we needed a new town garage. And what we're trying to plan for is not just the facility that we needed 10 years ago or that we need this year, but we really reached beyond the select board. We reached engineering companies and residents of the town who are experts in these different areas. And we reached out to other towns to see how they made these really critical decisions. It's the most expensive project that this town has to consider or has considered for a long time. So we wanted to make sure to understand what the requirements are that we believe we have compared to other towns like ours, and then looking out to see what we think the future requirements are going to be. The worst thing that we could do, I think, is recommend a 3 or 4 bay garage and come back to the town in the same time frame that they're paying for this 30-year bond and tell them we have to add on to it again. And it's going to be more expensive. And to answer the questions of why didn't you consider this back when it would have been less expensive? And we might say today it's $150,000, $175,000 a bay. I would worry what that same cost would be 5 to 10 years from now. I think that's what we have to think about in total, what we're being asked to do and the things we can't even anticipate. The things that we're talking about as a board today and what the state is requiring this town to take care of from a road perspective, we didn't even anticipate 5 years ago. So we're trying to look out and see what we know is going to happen and then make the best recommendation we can. But I agree with you, all these things we have to consider. We do have a question online. Why, I'm sorry, maybe you have your glasses on. This is from Phil Phillips. Why did you pick the parcel that has a fill area instead of further up Route 12 on the Keith property where Lakeview Lane Road is?
I can jump in on that. a little bit first. So the site itself that we pick right now has site balancing. It's actually still a cut site. So there's still going to be about 3,000 yards excess net cut that'll be blended and wasted on site. So the further up we go, it's actually more cut and more fill to waste. So it may look like that there's a lot of fill there, but we are doing a lot of cut on the other side. That's just moving the dirt from one area to the next.
This, your answer has got to do more with screening, right? You're trying to hide the building.
No, that's really not the reason, but the other part of the reason for picking the lower site is wind. The wind whips through that field. The further south you are and up on the hill, that wind is insane up there. We walked it a couple times. I walked it with Michelle, and there was a couple days where it really wasn't blowing that bad. And the difference between the lower field and the upper field was remarkably different. So there's a lot of concern about having our sand pile and the buildings and everything up on that hill with the tremendous amount of wind that goes through there.
Okay, so the wind being a factor, the way the garage is positioned now, you're going to have a snow drift from the overhead doors every minute. Can you turn your building so that the wind blows off the roof, blows in front of the door?
Again, everything we have right now is just conceptual plans just to show you what it would look like. When we go into final design, and Peter, I mean, you could probably jump in on that. I guess the question is, are we going to get snow drifts the way the doors are positioned right now? I would imagine when you do your final design, all that'll be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is just conceptual to show a footprint, how it can lay out. That all that stuff will be taken into consideration and discussed with the town, and there may be other reasons why we want to reorient it as well. So this is just a matter of getting a footprint on the site itself and seeing what we have for cut fill and the length of the road and how everything kind of fits.
It also puts a big drift on it.
So online, Phil has a follow-up question. What do you have to cut? And the response online, it seems Phil may need clarification about what is meant by cut.
Removing of soil. The cut refers to moving a soil. So you have to cut into it and move it around, manipulate the soil there to create a flat site.
It might be okay to write in and speak, because I think he's on hold about it.
So any other questions?
I have no, on the 2021 overview. The very last item, January 2021, town begins talking prices with Keith. Wouldn't that be before April?
Yeah, 2020.
Or 22?
It's 2022. So there's a typo on the last line. It's in chronological order all the way through. Thank you for catching that for us. We'll correct it. It's January 2022. So online? Yeah, thank you. You bet. Some advisor to the board one time said you should always put a trick in just to be sure everybody's reading. So I guess we were trying to follow his instructions. How much of a tax increase would you expect for the maximum of $2.5 million?
Okay, we do have those numbers based on the 2.5 million and a loan for 30 years at 2.125%. The maximum amount would be 7-cent tax increase, which would add about $70 per $100,000 of property value. So that would be the maximum. So if we were to take out the money that we have in our account, the ARPA money, it comes in under budget, it would be less than that. Possibly as low as 4 or 5 cents, but right now we're saying the maximum amount would be 7 cents at a tax increase, again, which would be $70 per $100,000 of assessment.
You guys mind if I invite Bill to?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes, I just have a clarification. So Glenn, you said that on a property that's $100,000 valuation, it would be about $70 increase, okay, per that amount, but that's not figuring in the money that you have ahead and the potential ARPA.
That is correct.
So that
Or,
would be
or any potential savings we have.
correct. So that would diminish that amount
That's correct.
of tax assessment.
Correct.
Okay, great.
So in fact, Sharon, it's how the question is asked, right? If you asked us to give you a range, what we really think based on the money that we have from ARPA, what we've already have in our accrual accounts, the 20% that we added as a budget overrun so that we would never ask for something, get it approved, and then find that we couldn't construct in that amount. All of those taken into account. Sharon advised us, looking at all the numbers, that it's probably going to be somewhere between 4 and 7 cents, right? So that's, we have to give you the absolute upper limit, but we believe it's going to be somewhere between $40 and $70 per 100,000.
$40 per 100,000 on the low end.
Okay, yeah.
I have another question. In September of 2021, the board purchased temporary structure. Where'd that money come from?
Came from the reserve fund. So we had a reserve fund that allowed us for improvements on the property, and we have been accumulating improvement funds. That's another thing that we should note too. We don't believe that we'll need to continue to reserve $10,000 every year toward a new building, right? So that'll be another adjustment that we'll make in the taxes per year and what we're accruing. So that in the balance could be quote unquote applied, right? So we won't continue to accrue that money toward the new building, but we had accrued a reserve fund for improvements, and that's where we took the money from.
So this is a separate reserve fund from the $10,000 a year that you were setting aside for the new structure?
I believe we took it out of the general reserve fund, but I'll ask Sharon. So for the follow-up, we're going to take all of your questions and make sure that we answer them. So I'll ask to verify which reserve fund we pulled that from.
Because I thought the board was limited as to how much money they could spend without going to town meeting. Is that still in effect or not?
And how much we can spend for which thing?
For anything?
Without going to town.
We are with the board. The board can spend without going to town meeting if we don't have to have a loan. So a loan that doesn't extend for more than 5 years, because the loan that we're talking about for this building is greater than 5 years, it requires town meeting. But in reserve accounts, we don't have to go to the town for monies that the select board spends that's earmarked in the reserve funds. So for equipment, for example, we set aside reserve funds in equipment. If we are going to exceed the amount of money or get a loan for a piece of equipment like the grader, we have to go to the town and ask for that. But if we're spending out of reserve funds that are earmarked for a particular purchase, we do not. It's for loans.
This building costs.
The temporary structure?
Yes.
Do you have that?
I do. point? Here it is. It was $100,000 even, and $17,000 for total on it. And again, that building will be used as a sand shed, which has been a problem for years with our sand pile out there, spring meeting requirements. So it's something that is needed anyhow, but we utilize it as a temporary structure. Is the intent.
So I'm still confused about the two funds. This is a different fund than the $10,000 a year that you're putting aside for the new garage, or is it not? So that means that money's gone.
We'll clarify. Let us go back and clarify the fund.
All this will be in minutes and be online, so here's the opportunity to verify.
I think those are the. I think, right.
Phil, you could, do you have another question online? If you do, you can unmute and ask.
I did. Can you hear me? Am I on?
You're on.
Yeah, we can hear you.
First off, I'd like to thank Mr. Wills for telling me what a cut is. I've been doing site work for 50 years. I got a pretty good idea. And if you go up Route 12 further where it's flat, I don't see any cut. Did you
I'm
get
sorry,
all
Phil.
that?
Could you just ask your question again? We're having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. First off, I want to thank Mr. Wills for telling me what a cut was. I've been doing it for 50 years and I got a pretty good idea of what it is. Okay, well, if you drive further up the road, the property is flat. And where's the cut?
That's the cemetery.
He's talking about a site.
Sorry, I thought I guess we were confused on the two sites. We were talking about two sites on A and B at the Keith Farm based on the plan and not on Lakeview. We never considered any of that, one, because the Keiths wanted to keep that for possible residential development and our concerns about the wind up there. So that's the reason that I was confused about which site you meant. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. No, you answered my question. That's great.
What's gonna happen to the old site there?
So for folks online, the question is, what's going to happen to the current site?
Expand the fire.
Well, again, it's public property, so we can ask the town what they want to do with it. I don't think at this point there's any plan for use for it. But I've heard people talk about, volleyball courts and different things, but it's town-owned property. And if we can make it of some use for the public, that would be a good thing. But right now, there's no plan for it.
There'll be a cost on it, clean that site up, tear the building down.
Yeah, we have gotten prices for demolition. We've also talked to Brent about possibly burning it down, which would be no cost to get rid of it. So, we're prepared in either case to take care of that. But you're right, there is some added cost that at this point would probably be minimal.
We talked about a couple of different things. I think, Shorty, you bring up a good point. We just have to remember that that's the ingress and egress for the fire department. So what you do with that land, you have to think about a bit, but we want to keep in mind that the fire department is there and that they have clear access. The other thing that we talked about is even with temporary structures, and what do we do and how do we move equipment? We just always have to, if we were even going to build on that site, we have to always remember that that's a shared area with the fire department. So we're trying to think through what the right next steps are for that property, but bearing in mind how it's currently used.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I guess we can conclude this meeting. Yeah, our next meeting is going to be on the 22nd, I think we said, 24th at 6 o'clock. The beginning of that meeting will be items that will be addressed on town meeting. And we also have a school board meeting, or no school board meeting, but a meeting regarding the town leaving the district, and that'll be on the 22nd at 6 o'clock. So that'll be an open meeting also here in the church and available on Zoom. So check the website. All the times are there. The links are there. And we thank everybody for attending. And if anybody wants to look at the drawings up here, feel free to do that. Oh, wait, we have one more question.
The vote, the ballot vote, town meeting day, going to ask whether or not the town is going to bond for 2.5 million or some other number.
Yeah, the question is the question on the ballot going to be for 2.5 million? And the answer is yes. So it's a maximum up, you're allowing the board to spend up to $2.5 million for the land and the building, everything complete.
If you get a majority no vote, you might be talking to us next summer.
If we get a no vote, we're back to step one.
And Rob, you might be able to speak to this, or Michelle better, but the ramifications of a no vote are we have to find an answer for, let's call it December to April, because the building as it stands today cannot have greater than a 2-inch snow load on it, 4-inch snow load. And it's just not a tenable location, right? So we've looked at temporary places to operate the town garage out of locally in local towns. Where can we store the equipment? What's going to happen if I think if you ask me, even having employees there is a risk. Having our equipment in the building is a risk. So we're trying to present to the town what the alternatives are. If it gets voted down, do you have an answer for that?
Well, if it gets voted down, we don't start at zero, but we take significant steps back. Then we look at the temporary structure that we purchased and making it more than temporary for 1 year, which would mean insulating and trying to heat a trash bag, more or less. I mean, that's what those buildings are. So that's a concern. That's another reason that we decided that we needed a temporary structure. The village of Morrisville, and I might be wrong, Michelle, because I think we had this discussion, but the village of Morrisville right now is renting a building for $100,000 a month until they can build. A year, excuse me, a month, a year, excuse me, $100,000 a year, sorry. Because I had reached out to people in Morrisville to say, listen, if we get heavy snow, where can we keep our trucks? Where can we work out of? So, you reach out to people in Morrisville, and we had plans in place in an absolute emergency, but it certainly wasn't doable for more than a day or two, which was people were just willing, Nick Minash was willing to allow us to store our trucks in a heated garage for a couple days until the snow blew off the roof or Michelle was able to melt the snow from inside. So that's the concern. That's the real concern. Ideally, we would be able to use the site that we have. That would save us money, but we can't. Not and meet the other goals that we have, which is to construct a building that's going to last us more than 10 years. And then we've got some concerns about the site that we have now. So it's not starting at ground zero, but eventually that money is getting thrown away, honestly, Mr. Cody. That's what, I mean, we're trying to heat a temporary building until we figure out what else to do. Now, I look at this kind of the way Brent and the fire department looked at their fire truck. They came to us saying, we're only going to spend up to this amount. The truck comes in less. Then that's what we take a loan out for. And listen, we would love to see this number less. I mean, I'm not going to be on the board after town meeting, but we keep talking about what can we do to make this less. We want this to be less. We are fortunate enough that budget wise, Michelle runs a great budget. We never work in the red. We're always in a good position budget wise. And we want to continue that. We don't want to tell you that this building is what we should build and then come back to you in 10 or 15 years asking for more. So that's the concern, Mr. Cody. You know, like absolutely 2.5. When we heard that number, but it's realistic. It could be at that amount, and we need to prepare you for that. And originally, we had talked about the land being a lot more expensive. So we've already negotiated a price for the land down to a lesser amount, which we are hoping that we'll get the yes vote on town meeting, because we're not going to buy a piece of land and not use it. It doesn't make any sense to buy a piece of land and not be able to use it and not know if we're going to be able to use it. So we're under a time crunch as well.
So was the land on a different item?
No, it's all inclusive. It's all inclusive. Yep.
Building, the deal we worked out, contingent upon approval.
So,
on town meeting day.
so we negotiated and have a memo of understanding with the landowner. So if the town approves and says, yes, we'll move forward with the purchase. If the town does not approve, we will not move forward with the purchase, but we have agreed to a price. And honestly, I don't think we can emphasize enough. We evaluated, and we maybe didn't talk about this earlier. We evaluated based on the criteria that our consultant put together of location, size, all of the probably 20 different criteria. We identified 28 properties, 28 parcels in the town of Elmore that fit that. We narrowed it down to the top 6. We called all of those landowners and were told no by every landowner we called but one. And that landowner had 2, on the same site. So we evaluated 2 different areas on that site plus the state park land. That was the totality of the options, aside from the current site that we have that has lots of permitting issues and other things we're trying to solve. While we're trying to solve for additional problems. And there is a concern that if it's a no vote and we don't have a continued option on the land that we found, that we're in a difficult situation as a town. There are no landowners who have, we talked about as a board, do we look at land close to town, but not physically in the town of Elmore? But I don't believe that the town of Elmore is going to want to pay taxes to another town or where our town garage is located. That to us seems like a non-starter with the town, but this is the what we think is not, and I don't feel like, I think I can say on behalf of the board, we're not settling We're not saying we looked at every piece of property and this, we are really happy that we found one that does work really well, that the engineering team says is a very good location, fits our criteria, was one of the top 5 that we really wanted to go after. So I think we're very fortunate that we found a piece of property that'll work and a owner willing to work with the town on it.
So you can't do a ballot with an article that would give you A, B, and C options. Why not? Vote on one.
Well, I guess we could, but the problem is, why would we buy land if we're not going to build on it? I mean,
No, but it gives you the option of a less chance of a no vote. This is a big deal.
it is a big deal. We agree. It's a huge deal. But, let's say we got approval on purchasing the land and a no on the garage. Now we own a piece of ground that we're not building on.
All I'm saying is the total amount, not separate the land. Give us option A for one size garage, option B for another size garage, and option C. And let the town vote on those 3 options. And then you get your land, you're going to get not the biggest, maybe not the biggest shop, but maybe you will. I don't know. It's a big deal for a little town.
Oh, it's great.
Again, I think we are giving you worst case scenario and we can work backwards. If just because you are allowing us to spend, I look at this as if I was going to buy a house. And I went and got pre-approved for a loan and they said, you can spend up to this amount. And I go out and I start looking and I'm like, I can afford this, but do I really want this? Is this going to meet my needs? Is this going to be too much for me? Is it going to make me uncomfortable? Is it going to make me not want to buy something else or affect my cost of living? I think the board is very concerned about this price, very concerned. And I think the town also has a road commissioner and a highway foreman who is very concerned about the cost of anything that affects this town. That's why in the 6 years I've been on the board, we don't go and buy the Cadillac truck with every option. We don't go buy a $600,000 grader when we can buy one that's been sitting as a demo for a few years. I think we have the right people in place that will help guide the process so that it isn't 2.5. And we're asking for that trust. And that's why we need, listen, I don't want this to be the only time we see people. And, with Zoom and everything else, we really want people to be engaged in the meetings. And when it comes to designing the building, Mr. Cody, if you want to come and be a part of that, I don't see, the more the merrier. You know construction as well as anybody and what facility would need. Come to the meetings, get involved in the design. And then you can help weigh that. I mean, I appreciate the fact that Shorty's been working out of that building for months now, and he's got a grasp of it. I'm sure he's got some things that he thinks a garage should have. So this isn't like, we don't want to stop this train. We want to keep going, but of course we have to be mindful, and we have time for design stuff. We have time for that, but we got to start with a top and say, we don't want to go beyond this. We know the impact of this already. And we need to adjust that.
I don't want to be the devil's advocate, but you have priced very big buildings for a small town. Montgomery is a little bit bigger than Elmore. I think they have 3 10-wheeler trucks. We only have 2. We used to have 2 single axle trucks. We've always had 2 trucks in the town of Elmore. We've always had a grader. We've always had either a bucket loader or a backhoe. And that is it. So if you do the option, if you could do an option thing, you're not doing it after the fact. If we give you the 2.5 million, your carte blanche to say, let's go for it, 2.5 million. If we only give you 2.1 million, or if we only give you 1.8 million, you got to bill for that. Right now, that's a better chance of getting a yes vote than a no vote, because a no vote puts you back to square one. That's my point. You know, I'm not saying a 2-bay garage is a big enough garage. I'm saying in Town of Elmore can use a 3-bay garage and live with that. I don't care for another 50 years before they have to add on. Because we haven't expanded our facility. We've only expanded the size of our equipment. And you've got, that building is going to be what, twice as big as that? Not quite. Well, I mean, usable. I mean, that thing's right. Usable. Yeah, well,
I think you bring up a valid concern, and this is how we've decided as a board to move forward. And if we get a no vote, then the board will have to adjust. I don't think the board starts at ground zero, but it's definitely a setback, and it's something that we are definitely concerned about, for sure.
how soon after, if you get a no vote, how soon after can you vote in again? You got to wait, what, 60 days?
It's, I don't know that. I don't know that, but I think basically I think it would at least be 60 days. It would at least be 60 days. I think it's 60 days based on the school stuff we've been discussing. So
The reason we picked town meeting today was to try to meet this construction season. So, you know, if there is a no vote and we have to go back for another vote, chances are we would miss the 2022 construction season, would be in the 2023. And I guess the risk with that is right now we're taking advantage of very low interest rates, and the interest rates are going up. So, you know, 2.125% is still a pretty good rate. So, you know, if we were to wait 60 days, 90 days, you know, who knows what the rate's going to do, but, you know, that's where we're at right now.
What if you get approved for 2.4 in with inflation? No, no.
I think we're good.
so that's when design comes into place big time. That's when design comes in. And yeah, I mean, that's when you have to start cutting. There's no doubt about it.
We wouldn't start a project if we know, because we're gonna know what the construction costs are, and we're gonna sign the contracts, and we're gonna do everything, right? So we'll have to hire and do all of that. And if they say you can't build this for under 2.6, then that's when you cut. That's when you reduce. I think that even when we get even that close, so we built in a 20% contingency, right? When all the construction and all of the contracts are signed and we know what we're building to, I think that's our opportunity to say, is it $175,000 less to do a 4-bay instead of a 5-bay? And that's when, as the select board, the board at that time will have to say, that's the prudent, right decision that we should make. We should try to bring this in closer to 2.1 or 2, not try. The idea was never, ever to spend the maximum. It was to make sure we asked for enough so that we could build what the town feels like. And as we negotiate contracts and everything else, we felt like we could make. When the select board came forward to purchase, what's the last big purchase? We asked for maybe the grader. When we came forward to purchase the grader or the fire truck, we asked to be allowed to spend up to a certain amount, and we came in under all of those because we're trying to make sure that we're not getting approval from the town for a piece of equipment that we need, but we're not allowing for any unforeseen circumstance, a change in interest rates, a change in some other thing that we've got. So we're not, I just want to, I'd like to try to change that narrative. We're not asking to build the Taj Mahal of garages. If the feedback we get, and we, interestingly enough, we've been working on this for 2 years. I think we've probably had 5 people come to a select board meeting and weigh in. We've tried to get, set up committees and boards. So we've hired consultants to come in and we've looked at other towns. We've tried to look at what is closest to us that has gone through construction, what I'd call modern construction. So something that's been built in the last 10 years. And that has been the guide. But I think to your point, Mr. Cody, if the town comes to these meetings and they say to us and they come as we're going through the final process and say, we really feel strongly there needs to be a 4-bay and not a 5-bay, then I think that's what the town select board is going to do. I think that's the trust you have to have in the select board, is that we are really trying to make the right decisions for the town. We're not trying to come in and tell you we really only need to build a 3-bay, because we know that's not the right thing. But I think that your points are valid ones. And we're completely open to the concept of adjusting to be under and to come in at we said, even bringing this to the town, how do you present something that we absolutely positively have to do, that we feel like we put a lot of homework into and we've asked a lot of consultants about, and is the right financial investment? It is an investment the town is making. And I think you've made a valid point. Maybe a 4-bay will be the better route. But that doesn't mean you vote no here so that we can bring it back forward. It means you say yes. The concept that you have, from the land to the type of building to the people that you brought forward to it all looks good. It looks like what we need, maybe slightly smaller footprint.
Yeah, just to follow up on Caroline saying, we invite everybody to come to our select board meetings. I mean, Don's sitting here, he attends every meeting. He's the only one that's at every single meeting that we have. So, we invite everybody to participate, and, we'll welcome any comments, and, certainly put it into the thought process, as well as, our design engineers will be there, and it's posted, the agendas are posted every month, and we welcome as many people that can attend. Okay, that sounds like it's it. So again, we thank everybody for attending. It is recorded and will be available on the Elmore website if you want to sit through and watch it again. But it will be available, as well as minutes for the meeting will be available.
And there's a question.
Oh, hold on.
Outbound. So the question online was, how are we going to outbound information so more people can know? So we're going to post it to the website. We'll post an FAQ. So we've gathered all the questions that everybody's asked, and we're going to write them out and post them to the website. And Don, did you have a question?
Not so much a question. As Glenn has just pointed out, I think I've missed 2 select board meetings in the last 3 years. So I've seen what the select board has gone through in trying to get this whole project solved and addressed in the way that's best for the town in the long run. I tried to point that out in a little piece I put in the News and Citizen here between Christmas and New Year's. There is no project like this that's ever done that satisfies everybody. There's always going to be something that somebody's going to think should have been done differently, or we could have saved a little money here, or maybe we should have spent a little bit more money there. But I think everybody here in the town of Elmore can thank themselves for the Board of Selectmen we have and the amount of work they've put in on this project. I haven't agreed with everything I've seen go along with it all the way either, but everything has been worked out. The biggest letdown from my point of view was to think, when Bob Burley and I first started talking about it, when we became concerned about the current site with the current land issues, about trying to get some land here from the park down opposite Cody's farm. I was the first one to contact the state about that. I called Mark Snyder, who lives in Stowe and is at Forest Park. His comment to me was that, gee, Mr. Valentine, Elmore has been a wonderful host for the state park. We really like to work well with towns that host our state parks. Let's see what we can do. We've heard from the legislature that it would take roughly a year to get something lined up once A&R was through with it, to have the legislature approve it. But from the time that that started, everything seemed to slow down. And I know Bob Burley was frustrated as a dickens by the time he gets through trying to talk with the state about it. And I recently learned that where the town always plowed the state park parking lot in the winter, all of a sudden this year, very quietly, they've got a private contractor over there. That kind of gives me the idea of how the Forest and Parks really works with the people that that host their parks. I'm not impressed with the state over this. And I think we've done the best we can to get land that will do the job at the lowest possible price. You can always go into eminent domain when you're looking for land for public project. I think it's much nicer if you can go and work it out with a landowner and buy it. You know, when you go into eminent domain, you don't know what the court's going to decide for a proper land value. You don't know what you're going to spend in attorney's fees. I think we owe our select board a vote of thanks. I really do.
So we'll gather all the information. It'll be available online. Questions, answers will be available online. All the follow-ups we had from tonight will be on the website. We'll put meeting notices on Front Porch Forum, in the newspaper, try to get more people to come out and engage in the discussion and learn. Anything else? Thank you all for coming out tonight. Drive safely.
Looking at the drawings, and the shed's in here, so